The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Let's do it. Another Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for being here with me. Really appreciate all of you joining us. For this week's show, we're going to start what is something I do on one of my some other programs. At least on one program that I do, it's a wrestling program where I go through the year that was and just kind of touch on some things that happened to chronicle the year it was in media. We're going to go through that, part one of that tonight. But first, we want to look at the things that are coming up next year in 2022 and look at what other disruptors are coming into the place of where streaming has been for the last couple of years. We now have it established. And all the corporate companies that are out there, all the big media conglomerates have already built their streaming services. And now the fight begins to start whittling them down. Who's going to go ahead and get bought? Who's going to get put into other places? And how things will play out in terms of trying to get the consumer to go ahead and buy into all those services, whether they're able to get them to buy individually or eventually have to be bundled up so that all these services that would have gotten a separate price are now going to have to be embedded just like cable was. And then what happens next? Do we get another remote control to control everything in one shot? You know, it's those kind of things that are going to happen next. So while that's all happening, we're going to look a little bit farther. So we're going to look at the Metaverse, look at crypto, look at NFTs. We'll go into some of those areas and how it's going to disrupt media altogether. Because for those of you content creators, you're looking into what's going to happen in the future, and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, if this is going to happen, then I need to make sure to stay on top of things and learn what I can do to make money and monetize or help put my content out there to other places to get it noticed. So there's all of that coming up now that we should also keep an eye on. So we got all those kind of stories to talk about here of future disruptive technology and what that's going to do. So we'll talk about the Metaverse. We'll talk about NFTs. We'll talk about how it's going to disrupt gaming and music. We'll also talk about how it's going to disrupt collector culture, but fans might not buy into it. And then we'll also look at the radio itself, because I want to go and look at a little bit of radio when it comes to a report card on what's happening now with streaming services and with radio and with the podcast and all together. Edison has put together a 5-year report card in their Share of Ear series where they do a lot of surveying and studying and research. We'll go ahead and look at what they found out there. And then a few other things on radio I'll just touch upon. And then we get into the year that was media, where we were still in the middle of the pandemic. A lot of places were still locked down. We still had a lot of restrictions in place. And I think by the end of the year, I mean, there are still places that are feeling that we're still dealing with variances that are still coming into play, like hurricane conditions. You know, here comes another storm. We need to prepare for it. We need to go and do our normal procedures and our normal protocol. We need to make sure to have everything in place and ready to be prepared and to continue to stay ready and prepared. It's what we are now. And so that's the way I look at it, being a Floridian here, native Floridian. We deal with hurricanes all the time. So we know they're coming, we prepare for them, and we hope for the best. And that's it. You know, and it's things that will affect, it would cause risk to ourselves, our family, our home, everything. So that's the way I look at it. It's like a natural disaster. But we look at it as hurricane season the same way here. And we say to ourselves, okay, so we know what's coming to us. We have to prepare for it. And that's kind of like the survival mindset that I've had. And I think other people could probably take upon. You tell me if you think about it or not. And this is regardless of what you think about vaccinations at all. I'm not even touching any of that right there. Again, apolitical show this is. So let's get into Metaverse and media. Variety put together a Variety Intelligence Platform report on how tech's hottest trend will impact the entertainment industry. So we're hearing a lot about it. We know Zuckerberg and the newly formed corporate name Meta for Facebook is trying to get into augmented and virtual reality. They've already been invested in it, but now they want to go full force. So let's see what they're trying to do. Think Ready Player One. That's what I keep thinking about when I think about augmented reality and virtual reality. So The question many media executives probably have at the moment is about the metaverse, touted by some futurists as something that will fundamentally change the way businesses digitally interact with customers. Now, we also know if you watch Facebook or TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, or any kind of content creators that talk about Web 3.0, maybe you've heard that term being thrown around now. Well, that's talking about a decentralized internet, where it's not just a base where it comes from, where a company is based somewhere. It's that it's individually based. I don't have my whole head wrapped around it either, but that's where crypto, everything's built on a blockchain model. That's where you hear about NFTs or crypto currency being used as valuable, as currency that'll be used of value, that's being created as valuable. And there's just all different feel to it. And who knows if the metaverse also includes a part of this as well, because it's all digital. It's all streaming in front of you, in 4K, pretty much. But to those who've been hearing the term throughout 2021, metaverse at this point may represent little more than a clever-sounding buzzword that will lose relevance in the next few years. Well, that's what World Wide Web was. And somebody else will tag this as something else. So the stark differences in the stances stem from a variety of factors, including misunderstandings of what the metaverse actually entails and the overuse of the term. So Variety is defining the metaverse as something that will be a shared virtual space where all can interact via digital avatars navigating a three-dimensional environment. I would like to think of it as maybe like co-working spaces. So it's not a company, but people have their own cubicles, their own spaces, and they all communicate with each other, and they basically have a marketplace, something like that. So it's less of a particular virtual place and more of an umbrella term denoting the digital experiences we will all eventually have when technology, including augmented and virtual reality, allows for us to interact in ways that are currently impossible, like playing a game on a platform with no cap for concurrent users. Adopting such a broad view of the metaverse makes it no wonder that Bloomberg Intelligence predicts that the market opportunity for the metaverse could hit $800 billion in just 3 years. I mean, I don't know much the health and beauty industry, which is a whole lot of money, but I don't know if it makes that much. I thought it makes $1 billion. You're talking about $800 billion. I mean, Jesus, that's a whole lot. But how will any of these billions find their way into the pockets of entertainment industry stakeholders, such as TV networks? So the big conglomerates now, they're trying to figure out how can they cash in on this. They, just like they were thinking about, there's, a plan in place now where, next 5-10 years, streaming content, streaming platforms, the over-the-top systems that we have now, the OOTDs, they're in place now because they had to find the next disruptive technology and embrace it, because the technology of the 70s and 80s has now started to become obsolete. Before that, the advent of television, we had antennas, and we had, UHF and VHF towers. Now we're at the point where we had cable, where you just had lines going across home to home. And now we're at the point where, we don't even use satellites now. We're now at the point where digital, everything's run through internet, through broadband. And then what happens next? Then we have, 5G. We're moving into points where we're not even running stuff off of towers. That we'll just have ports or servers that can be put out there, or modems basically that can be put anywhere to go ahead and keep you connected. Things like that. I mean, we can basically go anywhere now, except for desolate areas that are just very rural and just don't have any signal. But if you can find signal anywhere in the world, you can stay connected. And you can basically have the quality connection that you have here than you have anywhere else. It's a lot of changes, and corporations, they'll do what they can to milk the most out of certain technology, but they're not good at adapting or adopting after something becomes hot, because then we get the grassroots type companies, your smaller businesses, the innovators that are the true disruptors, the pioneers. And then after that, now we're at the phase where these big corporate media conglomerates are saying to themselves, okay, how can we jump in on this? Because we're going to have to go and put money together to invest. We need the streaming money from these platforms, the subscriptions, to come into place. We need to figure out how to get our advertising in order so that we can go ahead and fund the next deal that will keep our companies going into the next century, right? That's what they're thinking about. So that's the question. Now, at the moment, big media is thinking to themselves, well, do we already have Roblox and Fortnite? Isn't that part of the metaverse? And haven't people been saying metaverse before 2021? So Variety and VIP Plus conducted 8 interviews with executives across industries spanning entertainment, research, venture capital, and gaming on topics such as perceived revenue potential, best practices and challenges for media brands in the metaverse. So Andrew Wallenstein writes this story, and this is 26 pages on a PDF that they put together. It's quite extensive here, but we'll try to go ahead and just briefly go through this, and I will put this in the link so that all of you can go ahead and take a look at this for yourself, and you can go and read through this whole story. But there's a bunch of highlights I could talk about here. So they go into the original start of Facebook buying Oculus Labs in 2014. 8 years later, the relevance is becoming clear. Oculus is turning out to be a beachhead, an entirely new frontier for Facebook and their controversial founder, Mark Zuckerberg. Now, in some of the stories they talk about here, they talk about what's in the metaverse. Are we there yet? Does the metaverse matter to media companies? Should media companies start preparing? And how can they start preparing? Now, as examples as to why is so important, Roblox owns what many today might instinctively identify as a kid's game, but the company has been long focused on building out a metaverse, making it easy for developers to create immersive Roblox experiences. They have 31 million average daily users globally during the first 9 months of 2020, and Warner Brothers actually partnered with Roblox to stage a launch party for In the Heights on their platform on June 11th. So they're looking at maybe the not too distant future, consumers will begin getting an understanding of Netflix as a place for more than just video. Any company serious about aggregating eyeballs and scale would have to think about the same, and other entertainment companies will follow suit. Now, we're already seeing some companies, broadcast companies in other countries, already trying to make the investment. So UK broadcaster ITV announced in late July it was backing Metavision, an agency that brings brands into the metaverse as part of a broader push to reach younger adults, 16 to 34-year-olds. And one major media conglomerate right now that's aware of the possibilities is Viacom CBS. They have an in-house futurist tasked with evaluating emerging tech. So they talked to a game publisher of a game called Strauss-Zelnick, Take-Two Strauss-Zelnick, and they make the point of, if you take Metaverse, SPACs, which is these companies that build out, they have multiple companies within it, special purpose acquisition company, stock trading is what that is. And so they're built to go and create new ventures or new innovations. So like for SPACs, for instance, I know that I bought into a SPAC stock for Golden Nugget. And now it's to go and build their new casino service for online betting called BetMGM. And that was the whole deal behind that. If you take Metaverse, SPAC, and cryptocurrency in 5 years, will any of this matter? So the architects of the Metaverse will eventually run into similar skepticism unless media companies become more open to letting their intellectual property live in environments outside of their control. But the companies should start investing in activations on platforms that stand a shot at being major players like Fortnite and Roblox. So if we start seeing all these people together, that's what's going on. Now, why are we doing this? Because the future audience is in the metaverse. That's what they're thinking about. They need to think about the future of consumers that will be absorbing and taking on their content. Because we know that cable and network TV is for an older audience. And for people watching on streaming platforms, that's for people like my age and younger, maybe like 20s to 50s. But then what about the group in another decade or so that, streaming platforms, we're going to do metaverse. That's the future. So this is why. So Ipsos did a poll talking about this. On a scale of 1 to 5, they asked, with representing very likely 23% of respondents aged 18 to 34 rated the likelihood of them buying virtual or reality products based on concepts and ideas they would create and see in a virtual world as a 5. So they're very interested in buying virtual and augmented reality devices. Right now, that might be something you're hearing about as a stocking stuffer for kids. That kids right now, they're not looking for toys. They want the devices. They want the eyepieces so they can go and put them on their heads and they can go virtual reality and go augmented, whatever they want. Now, not all executives are agreeing the best way to establish a presence is, again, they want to hold on to their stuff. They don't want to just give it to somebody else. They want to be able to use this just like they use where you had cable or network TV and then you use social media as a place to go ahead and keep your content yours, but then push it out to other people to promote it and maybe get people to go ahead and watch it, right? There's that part. Now, in definition of the metaverse, while digital platforms currently exist that can be said to be early approximations of what the fully imagined metaverse will be, its end state is entirely theoretical and highly subject to varying interpretations. But the conventional wisdom can be distilled thusly. The metaverse will be a shared virtual space where all can interact via digital avatars, navigating three-dimensional. Now, the other part that I talked about when it came to Ready Player One, that was the kind of example I put. Many currently find it difficult to define the metaverse in a few sentences. The reality is that views on how technology and society should interact in general sometimes affects how certain individuals view and define the metaverse. For example, Niantic founder and CEO John Hanke in August called the metaverse, that is the Ready Player One-ish environment, that many think the metaverse could be like a, quote, dystopian nightmare, due to his view that technology should be working to enhance the human experience, not replace it. And I agree with that. The thing is, no matter what, you want to be able to have this digital virtual environment. You can go ahead and do all this, but we don't want it to look like Ready Player One. So like the world around us is still beautiful and there's a lot of things to enjoy if you go outside. You know, you don't want to just make it where it's like Demolition Man, where the same thing. It's like, you know, it's this futuristic thing, but there's things about it where there's still nature. There's still things to go outside, you know, breathe in the air. Weather changes, you feel the world around you. You can get to still visit the world without having to go and do all this stuff from home wearing a VR device. Like I like the idea of wanting to be able to go out and go look at things. The takeaway for media professionals is that metaverse views exist on a broad spectrum. It seems more productive to view the metaverse as something that generally encompasses all technology, not just augmented or virtual reality, and it's just not fully developed. And it could help media companies avoid taking too narrow a view on the metaverse and as a result, making investments for the metaverse that aren't diverse enough, which they're talking about only working to translate intellectual property into virtual reality. So they talked to some people about this, and there's more to it, but that's all I'm going to take from there. But it is fascinating. I mean, you think about it. You have an information database that is the internet or entertainment, but it's a database. Like it's a place for reference. It's you go to that for everything. But then what if you're able to create a world inside of it? Encompass a whole different thing. It's like just an undersea world, a digital world. And we already have the sense of community in most cases with social media and how people interact on it. And then new disrupting social media platforms do that. We do our dating on there. We look at information as like a library in there. Like there's so many things that have been replaced with the internet. I mean, that's just what it is. And then there's a point where you want to keep nature. You want to keep reality, real reality. Listen, if you want to have the thing where it's like Ready Player One, where like the world around you isn't so hot and you're like, it's not dystopian like you're saying, but like if, you know, things kind of suck, you work at a part-time or full-time job you hate, it's a wage job, and, you know, you don't like what you have for family, you don't like what you have for your home, and you want to escape. You want to get away. Escapism. Well, that's what entertainment is. It's, some of it's meant to be escape. You reach a destination. You let yourself, you suspend belief. And so what you're doing here is you're suspending yourself into this metaverse, into this digital universe, which if they're able to build it right and you're able to put on a device and you're able to watch all this, imagine, what things would be like if you had all this extra stuff. And that's even with some of the lens technology that was out there, when Google Lens came out and what you were able to do with that to try to create some different things with it. It's a very early primitive technology now. You look at it almost 10 years ago. But the idea sounded interesting. And the thing, too, is that if you're an influencer or if you're just somebody that's working out of your bedroom, you're a keyboard warrior, imagine if you're in the metaverse and that you can make yourself into an identity that is bigger than life. That makes you, look, you're this bigger, more popular person virtually that, if you feel like you have, you're very introverted. You feel like you're anxious or depressed, and you feel like you're just not happy in life, the way that life is, everybody else lives it, and you want to live yourself in this world, and it makes you happy. Well, then this is something you could do where, we already feel that right now on social media, where certain content creators are able to make themselves something that they didn't realize they could be. The fame, the fortune, the notoriety, the validation, the acceptance. And all of that people crave and feel. As we know, we watch the stories, we hear about the stories, and we listen to music of those kind of stories. We watch television and movies with those kind of characters that tell stories similar to us. We listen to radio and listen to music on the radio or hear stories on the radio that familiarize with what we have. We relate to it. So that relatability, that feeling there of, being something that you don't have to be, that you can actually, without having to make physical changes, your perception into virtual reality or augmented reality, I see the benefit and I see the appeal. And if younger kids that feel like they're not getting an edge on this world and they feel like they need to do something else with themselves, then they do that. You sit behind an avatar. That's why some of these social media sites are so popular. That's why Snapchat is still a thing, because people don't have to put their pictures up there. They're putting up avatars. And you live behind your avatar. And some people, they don't want to show themselves at all. Or you might put yourself into like a cartoon character, a caricature, and put that up instead. Why not? There's a lot of options that you have. So this is to placate to a media consumer, and you're really just trying to do things just to give them the opportunities to make themselves a star, make themselves happy, make themselves feel wanted and accepted and validated and feel like they're in a community of like-minded people and relating to people like them. That's what it is. That's the Ready Player One thing, even though it's very dystopian, because you look at outside of the Ready Player One universe, and then you look at, if it wasn't so destitute and miserable, then you have that Ready Player One thing. That's the appeal of that movie. Steven Spielberg had a pretty good mindset on making that movie when he did, and it made sense. And that was a very good movie, by the way. I liked it. It gave you kind of an idea. It did give you a look into the future. And that future is what this metaverse is. And yeah, like I said, I don't think everybody's going to stick to this thing, but, we're getting the pioneers. We're going to get our Tim Beardsley pretty soon. We're going to get our Al Gore of the metaverse. I guess the Al Gore of the metaverse is Mark Zuckerberg. We don't know who the Tim Beardsley is yet. We'll probably discover him or her or they at some point. We'll figure that out. That's the other part. For those, when you talk about social equity and people of color and people that want to be inclusive, imagine that world. When you can't get people to really buy into that a company or people need to be checking all the boxes or the content you want to watch, some people feel like you need to have it check certain boxes. That has to be, it has to be more than a makeup of what the world is looking like, that it has to be something more than that. Like, you just can't have people with a certain race, color, creed, gender, and it's just like a light representation, what a natural representation is. We have to over ratio it, which is what's happening now. There's an over ratioing of everything, because anything you look right now, if you're looking at billboards, you're looking at advertisements, you're looking at TV, you're looking at movies, you're looking at, there's all of that. Anything visual, you're seeing there has to be a makeup and a ratio of more than, what the everyday America looks like, or what everyday world looks like. That there has to be more LGBT, more Black, Hispanic, Asian, enter ethnicity here, which is fine. But when some people might backlash against it, I'm not saying it's wrong or not. But if you wanted to really create that kind of community that's diverse and inclusive and really stands out, that's what the metaverse is. That's your haven. Because then all those areas of acceptance and understanding then goes into that universe, into the metaverse. When you can't get, the feelings or have the respect or, the dignity that you feel like you deserve, then you go to the metaverse. You go to this virtual augmented reality, and then you find like-minded people there, and you find it, and because then you're not having to go looking right in your backyard. Then you're finding people from all walks of life coming together in a community, and they're all attached together. It makes sense to me. It all makes sense to me. But how well will it do is the question. And then the other part is, when you have a society that you're building virtually, it's like a city. You have, people that are policing it, looking for the health and welfare of people, and you have a marketplace. And the marketplace includes trade of tokens or digital, art or whatever it could be that could be non-fungible tokens. And then you have currency in the form of cryptocurrency. And you have basically vaults, or these basically the platforms where this is all built upon, in some cases being done with blockchain or Ethereum or, whatever, Solana, whatever you want it to be. Because all the coins are basically built on some kind of computer encrypted platforms, which I don't know the whole thing about as well. I'm invested in the cryptocurrency, but I have only so much knowledge of what this is all going on. But hopefully I'm going to get more stories that we can go and talk more about this here on the program, because I think it's interesting. Because we need to go and look at where our media is going to be going. And if you want to be a content creator and you want to build, you need to go and look and see if there's some place in the metaverse for you to jump in first. It's that early pioneering stage. Do you want to be one of those people to go into the wild west of the metaverse and make something of yourself there? Find your success or find your community? You can do that. It sounds like they're trying to get there now. And then when the media companies and the corporate people come into play, then it might just get saturated and it'll be something that wasn't before, but people want to be a part of that grassroots part initially, right? Isn't that what you usually want it to be? So now, Variety also wrote a story about how NFTs will disrupt gaming and music in 2022. In the last month, there were over $3 billion in NFT sales across 10 blockchains, Ethereum accounting for over half of this with $1.7 billion in sales alone. In American currency, by the way, dollars. With the new industry seemingly a license to print money, they have increased the number of corporations looking to enter the market. So the likes of WWE and Electronic Arts made specific mention of NFT strategies, joining Fox, Warner Media, Live Nation Entertainment, Warner Music, the NFL, the NBA, and many more having a deepening interest in NFTs. So it's gone further than creating just new revenue streams. In many entertainment industries, NFTs represent a radical reimaging of power structures, cutting out the middleman, and enabling artists to share a much greater slice of the revenue pie. We've been hearing about that, and there's a story about that in music that we're going to bring up in a minute that also follows the same point. So NFTs allow for artists and creators to create the lion's share of revenues from the first week, around 80%, with royalties set and baked into any subsequent sales via smart contracts. In particular, it's interesting to hear that Electronic Arts, or EA, that publishes franchises like FIFA, the NHL, Madden NFL, annual titles, given their current model for video game DLC runs to NFTs in gaming. The titles create and generate incremental revenue via gamers paying to unlock additional players for dream teams in sports titles, or to unlock additional skins or in-game equipment for other titles, and are not transferable between games. In contrast, NFT games such as Axie Infinity, Meta Wars, and Sandbox 3D allow for in-game purchases to be held forever, to be traded for cryptocurrency, and in some cases, for items to grow in value as they are used in-game, known as play to earn, and can be best conceptualized by thinking of how a player can experience and level up characters or weapons in game. So instead of having the ways of finding out the tricks on how to go and win a game and finish the whole game off, then you're finding this right here. You're getting extra characters, you're finding extra powers, all these kind of things. I'm not a big person that's familiar with gaming. I stopped playing when I was probably about 12 years old because I kept losing all the time. That's just me. Play to earn is where game publishers and video game platforms will take most note. They'll be able to charge extractive rent from every sale made. Whether this will counter the potential revenue drops in annual game sales is doubtful unless publishers embrace adding prior purchases alongside annual updates. Think being able to transfer your Tom Brady 2022 edition into Madden 34. So we said about music. NFTs offering artists to make a living through their output without having to sign to a label and compromise their creativity. So one example is the rapper Latasha, who opted to go independent following her label experience and embrace NFTs as a distribution mechanism for her output. She put a music video out for Magda Universe, sold for 2.5 Ethereum, or $11,300 at current market price. On the Zora platform, she put it on. It was subsequently offered for resale for 1,111 ETH, or that's comparable to $4.9 million, with 30% of the final price going to the artist and her collaborators via the terms of the smart contract set with the original sale. So 30% of $4.9 million. About what, $1.6 million? It's a pretty good deal. And more than they would get if you had a record label. They would probably give you some kind of advance, like a third of that, and then you'd have to pay it back. And it would be so hard to pay it back, along with the other fees and expenses they put onto you, because they're trying to build you as a star when you're taking out the middleman here, just like they mentioned. NFTs offer musicians additional revenue opportunities. 3Lau, an EDM artist, is best known for offering up shares from streaming revenue to fans via NFTs, incentivizing the community to then listen and promote as much as possible to boost their own profits. So it's kind of like how the radio station contest used to do at the back of the day, pay to listen. So for as long as you pay on there and you let other people listen to the station, you're getting paid, so many dollars on the hour, whatever that is. There used to be a real gimmicky radio contest back in the day when radio was still very personal. So they anticipate that major labels will embrace NFTs. Again, the big corporate conglomerates, when they see this disruptive technology, they're going to jump in on it as well. But right now, they're in the exploratory phase. What can we do? How can we jump in? And when should we jump in? And what do we need to jump in? It's just like they mentioned on Metaverse. NFTs, the same thing. So keep an eye on it. So NFTs, therefore, represent substantial revenue opportunities within the entertainment industry, but equally offer a threat to existing gatekeepers. With the metaverse on the way, it's highly probable that NFTs will play an important role, with the current disruptions by no means the final ways that NFTs will create across the industry. Yeah, Variety is on point here. They're making good points in what they're talking about. So they're smart. These are things that have to be watched and have to be looked at. And I'm glad they also didn't put this behind a paywall. Like, we're actually seeing more of this information out here that we do need to see, because it's very important. The same way I'm forward thinking about my music, when I think about it, I made mention of how American music, it's where American companies, they have the control as to what music will be played when. I mean, Billboard does chart streaming, radio, sales, etc. But the disruptive technology that is streaming is what is where the real numbers are coming from, right? I mean, this is really just kind of a formula. It's the technology is a disruptor, and new technology disrupts previous technology. So when new technology, which might be an upgrade from something, or a completely new technology that will completely replace an old technology, then this is where we go into that part. A big company, they're not going to jump into it right away. But people like me, I like to go ahead and follow along with the process and see what's trending, what's coming up. I love seeing what's trending, seeing what's coming up right now. You know, when I listen to what TikTok, and I listen to what the audience wants and what they respond to, what they listen to, they have a better sense. The audience, you follow what the audience is doing, and you see what they're doing, and you watch the stats, and you listen in, and you look at the playlists that are on there, and then also even the same way, the streaming stations, the ones that are not streaming necessarily in America because they're not doing what other countries are doing. When I go to Europe, when I listen to stations in Europe, and I'll listen to maybe not just necessarily their frequencies, but they'll have their alternate streaming channels that are 24/7. They're nonstop. They are commercial free, or they're very limited commercials. And I'll hear the music that's there. And they are following the charts in their respective countries or what is going on around the world and what social media is saying, what TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and all these other places, and how people are responding to it, especially YouTube. YouTube, you know when some song's going to get big because then you'll see how many people are viewing it. Even if it is a video, if it's just a song with lyrics, you hear that, and then you'll see the response. So YouTube views, streaming numbers from Spotify, Pandora, and whatnot, they hold more value, honestly, over anything that radio does, because radio, they control their spins because they're based on controlling and regulating what artists they prefer to play. They control what gets played out there. And thus, because they still have a majority of clout into the algorithm of Billboard's charts, that's when they can still stay relevant. That's why you see on their charts, radio is getting more of a boost in the algorithm, so that you see some songs that are established that have been on the charts for a long time. They're still up there because radio continues to play them. Meanwhile, they still have a formula Billboard where they still look at streaming, which is pretty good. I don't know how much it counts towards the algorithm, but when you look at the Billboard Hot 100 or the Billboard 200 albums chart, and you're looking at the numbers that are there, your most popular songs that are going to make the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100, they're going to be based on an equal component of streaming, radio airplay, and some sales. So sometimes they actually made it where sales were more important, but then they had to change it because, the companies that were running groups like BTS or Justin Bieber, they found a way to go and do bundles. Ariana Grande took advantage of that. It's not her. It's her management. It's her publicity people. It's her label that did that. So they find ways to bundle, and create new deluxe versions or new versions of a song. And then when they get sales on it and they get the stands to go ahead and buy on it, then of course BTS was able to have a couple of the top most sold records this year. But when you look at the streaming numbers, when I look at the Spotify charts, Permission to Dance and Dynamite, they didn't rank that high. Not compared to what you're going to see on Billboard. Billboard are going to have to go and say, listen, that Dynamite was on the chart for a number of weeks, and the Permission to Dance also got up there. And so you have to say to yourself, okay, Butter, same thing. Butter was on there for a long time. And now because of the manipulation of sales by the record label, not the artist, okay, I'm not blaming the artist, but because of what they did, then the Billboard Hot 100 chart would have to include Butter as one of their top. So when you look at the top 10 songs on the charts, Butter was number 11, Peaches was 10, Montero 9, and these are songs that equally got streaming, sales, and radio airplay all played into it. Driver's License 8, Leave the Door Open, Silk Sonic 7, Kiss Me More, Doja Cat SZA 6, Good For You, Olivia Rodrigo 5, Mood, 24K Golden in Dior 4, Blinding Lights Weekend, a rollover from 2023. Save Your Tears, Weekend on Ariana Grande 2. And the number one song on the year-end Hot 100 chart is Levitating by Dua Lipa, which dominated for, this also was a 2020 song, Rolled Over, that dominated in streaming, dominated in radio, and also dominated in sales at some points. And they did. And you can't blame them for that. But back to my original point. When it comes to when these big companies want to get their claws and want to be able to regulate and control, then the next technology that comes across, like the Metaverse or NFTs or cryptocurrency, that's just going to change that. So things are only going to be run by money, or things are going to be run because the labels are going to say so, or the television executives are going to say so, or the studio executives are going to say so. Well, then the game changes when you take their autonomy away, and then you create a new community with new currency, new marketplace, and new community, and another playing field. Supposedly even playing field, but another playing field. And that's all there is to it. So I appreciate Variety going into that. It's pretty good. Now, in terms of NFTs, Mashable also wrote about this recently, and I'll bring that story up. They're saying that NFTs are disrupting collector culture, but fans aren't buying it. As the music industry continues to embrace NFTs, fans are left frustrated and confused. Now, they first talk about how K-pop fandoms, they're spending money on pieces of paper. Photo cards, collectible cards come packaged with albums or sold alone by companies or at events that can be resold for hundreds of dollars. And fans take to Discord servers, private Facebook groups, and Twitter DMs to try to complete their collections. But then K-pop fans are not the only devotees who could spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on merchandise. I had somebody that was Ubering in my car, and it was an NFT they had sold for $24,000. I'm like, what did you do to get that? But somebody did. And this was in Palm Beach. I don't know how the truth behind it is, but the fact that they were able to get somebody to buy something that was an NFT based, whatever it was, art for $24,000, that's a pretty big deal. And there was more coming where that came from. These sales have never been more important to artists and their companies who turn to creating merchandise and streaming concerts to recoup their losses. And in turn, fans showed up to spend money. But now entertainment companies and celebrities around the world are fully aware of how much their fans are willing to spend to represent their fandoms and support the media they love. It's no surprise they're now turning to NFTs as a new form of fandom merchandise. So somebody actually calls NFTs basically an expensive receipt, a glorified proof of purchase. So there is some criticism about NFT as long with cryptocurrency. They remain under fire because of the immense environmental impact they have due to the energy that each cell uses. Despite this, NFTs are being marketed by a wide range of celebrities, corporations, and companies as a way for fans to add to their collections. These artifacts aren't supposed to provide an exclusive experience of solo ownership. So it doesn't exist in fandom spaces where thousands or even millions of people can have the same album, jersey, or saved photos on their phones. But the digital asset you purchase isn't actually unique on its own. Rather, the data stored on the blockchain tells the world that you own it, even if someone else has the same asset on a different part of the blockchain. Thus, they say it's an expensive receipt or a glorified proof of purchase. NFTs are also positioned as profitable to collectors, despite evidence that suggests the boom itself is just a bubble. So while celebrities and companies are pushing big to bring their fandoms into NFTs, most of the notable coverage has revolved around high-profile sales of digital art and not the consumer buying digital merchandise. So some popular music stars are getting into cryptocurrency. Lil Nas X announced an NFT collaboration with TikTok before it was reportedly scrapped. Megan Thee Stallion promotes cryptocurrency to her fan base. Quentin Tarantino previously promised to sell off 7 Pulp Fiction scenes alongside bonus content like scripts and audio commentary before Miramax threatened the litigation to stop him. And then young adult authors like Adam Silvera and Nicola Yoon have expressed interest in creating a collective around NFTs, swiftly shelving the Realms of Ruin project and turning them into main characters of the day on book Twitter. Then you have influencers like Logan Paul, Naomi Osaka, Grimes, other celebrities, and getting into the NFT game. And people are starting to look at how NFTs are being positioned to impact fandom spaces. It makes sense, he says, in the story on Mashable. Fans are willing to shell out big bucks for exclusive merch and experiences, like the incredibly expensive Star Wars hotel that's already sold out for 4 months, even though it doesn't open until next year. So, of course, fandoms are seen as viable markets for NFTs. And that's the story they're bringing up here. There's more to it, but I'll leave it right there. But do you get where I'm coming from? These are things that are going to be focus for 2022. You're going to hear a lot more about it, and the Broadcasters Podcast will be here to go and talk more about it. Anyway, I'm going to take the rest of the program to go on a few other things that I wanted to go and touch upon that I thought were important. As I mentioned, the Edison Share of Ear Research, their 5-year report card. What is media doing right now in terms of audio? So this is what they found out so far. Let's bring up some of the highlights. Key findings include that Pandora is collapsing and Spotify is stagnating. Pandora's share since 2016 has cut in half. Spotify's exceptionally small ad-supported audiences remain unchanged. Pandora sees losses in most demographics. This is the one that's owned by SiriusXM, by the way. They see negative losses across the board, across numerous demographics. More by a younger demographic, 13 to 44-year-olds. Down 70% persons 13 to 17, 52% down 18 to 24-year-olds, down 48% among 25 to 34-year-olds, down 52% among 35 to 44-year-olds, up 14% among 45 to 54-year-olds. That's not good. As for Spotify, the growth for their platform has been from their ad-free subscription service. It's up 309% in the last 5 years. Their ad-supported free service grew by 0.3 of a point. So people are willing to buy the subscription, and it's up 300%. Since 2016, that's when I bought Spotify. So I'm one of those people. People are willing to buy some Spotify and listen because it's the worth of the price. And I got the family plan. Meanwhile, there's not much of a change, like you said, on the ad platform, the ad-supported free service. People are not listening so much for free. They're definitely listening to the subscription. Now they're willing to go ahead and pay for it. That's what's really changed in the last 5 years. Now there's so much there in Spotify. Now people want to go ahead and buy it. Because now everybody is accustomed to making the spend. They've done something where they changed their budget to include Spotify as a necessity and not a luxury. 72% of Spotify listeners aged 25 to 54, of which I'm within that demographic, listen to the ad-free subscription service. It's great. Listen, I listen to Spotify at least every day. I was looking at my Unwrapped section of Spotify, and I got to look at this again. Hold on. I put it up on my Twitter feed. You can go look for it at King of Podcasts. So I'll go and tell you real quick what the numbers said, which is quite interesting. So my top artist that I listened to, which was one of the top artists of the year on Spotify anyway, was Bad Bunny, Dua Lipa, Justin Bieber, Olivia Rodrigo, and Doja Cat. Listen to a lot of pop, okay? What can I say? Don't judge me. Top 5 songs, Astronaut in the Ocean, number 5 of my personal playlist. Peach is number 4, Good For You, number 3, Montero, number 2, Kiss Me More, number 1, with a bullet. And the amount of minutes I listened to Spotify this year, I remember it was 5,000, and I was amazed by that. Now, 25,324 minutes. 25,324 minutes, because I also included podcasts here, because I started listening to my podcasts on Spotify. I got myself used to watching there or listening there. I haven't watched or listened to Joe Rogan, not yet anyway. I don't know. I haven't bothered to. So yeah, that's quite interesting right there. Next, podcast daily reach among 18 to 34 and 25 to 54-year-olds has grown. So among 18 to 34, it's up 43%, up 51% among persons 25 to 54. So podcasting, I remember when I got told by the Donna Mike show that working in podcasting is like working at a McDonald's kid. Well, you know, I know Mike O'Meara is still doing podcasting. I don't know if he's doing that well. I know Don Geronimo tried podcasting and did not do well. He is in radio somewhere still and working. I mean, he's a journeyman. He's bounced around a lot of stations in his career. Just saying. So I don't dispute it. But listen, they thought podcasting was a joke. Well, now it's part of everybody's lifestyle. Podcasting, everybody listens to. A lot of people do. Then there's also about marketers, that marketers and agencies overestimate Pandora and Spotify shares and underestimate AM/FM radio listening. Well, that's to try to get the radio stations to get more advertisers to go buy into them. Is that part of that research right there? The audience share of AM/FM radio is 20 times larger than Spotify, 13 times larger than Pandora. I don't know about that. I mean, with Spotify and Pandora, well, I mean, Pandora's a different thing. But also, yeah, sure, you're going to have 20 times larger than Spotify because it's free. But, I mean, how many people are really engaged and listening with a lot of time spent listening? A large QM, large TSL. How much of that's actually happening? And how often can you get somebody to go ahead and buy into a business or service or product on radio? Especially when you have all these different ads that are being brought on, all these make good ads that they have to put out there, and the amount of ads they have to put out there in the first place. And sometimes you just can't get away from radio because it's just like you might turn it on in your car and it just pops up. AM/FM radio leads ad-supported audio, 75%, compared to the closest, which is podcasting, at 11%. AM/FM radio rules ad-supported radio and audio in the car, 88%. But again, ad-supported, they might say, yeah, it's got ads in there, but it's free. I mean, there's nobody subscribing to the radio, okay? They're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. There's much more to it, but that's just the crux of what I saw right there. There were a couple other stories I was going to bring up. Radio avoiding the abandoned mall feeling. The idea was that, you know, radios are obsolete, much like shopping malls are these days. And that you don't want to be the desolate mall that's running out of stores. And, you know, there are not a lot of people who are visiting it anymore. And all the stores are stations. Like, there's that kind of mindset. The other one also was about, Reuters put a story about how there's a radio DJ that you thought might be a real person, but it's actually a robot. So now we have robots being DJs on radio. So you can take a look at that story for yourself. There's also a look at the future of radio in 2030. And they made a story about that in Radio Inc., which I've been holding off to talk about. But, you know, I mean, I thought it was something just to hold on to and make a mention of. And it was Mike McVeigh, who was formerly with Cumulus fame, that talked about it. He says digital audio broadcasting will continue to grow and dominate all audio delivery. Much like Europe and the Commonwealth countries seeing its continued growth, we'll let you see it here in North America. There'll be more digital streaming platforms, additional voice-driven conveniences that make today's smart speakers look archaic, and the role of almost everything being on demand. Some over-the-air stations will eliminate their over-the-air transmission in favor of becoming a stream radio station, all digital. And we're already seeing some experimentation with that now, which is already happening in Europe and other parts of the world, just so you know. He also says podcast radio is already a thing and will continue to grow, and what's already established in the United Kingdom will spill into North America. U.S. and Canadian groups have at least one station. Many markets, it's a continual underperforming station, a prime candidate to experiment and something to consider, like a North American version of Podcast Radio UK. Well, now that we're here, let me go ahead and just briefly go into a little bit of the history of media that we had so far this year is, as I mentioned, we mentioned that media and entertainment were mobilized for major changes. We knew that the movie theaters were still down. Broadway was still down. Sporting events were not happening with crowds yet. So we had to wait. And that was the biggest thing, was to find the transition, the rolling out of media or live crowds or live events once again. And then how everything was looking on television as well in 2021 to start off the year. And then I talked about how the culture clash created the mainstream split. Because what I really got into in the subject, going back to episode 156, is that there was a full transition through the digital disruption, and we were getting a culture clash and the mainstream being split. The main thought process was that influencers becoming more of the day, and that we were not relying on watching our celebrities when they're not so glamorous and they're, sitting behind Zoom feeds, Zoom calls, sounding bad, looking bad, and everything being done through Zoom calls. Even trying to create series through Zoom calls, which was stupid, but it was at least experimental, and they tried because they were trying to find some way to try to keep people engaged in watching their content instead of watching reruns. And I also talk about the culture war and its effect on entertainment moving forward. And that peak TV, or the amount of TV shows being produced, was done. Because there's not as much content being done as it was. Plus, we also know that things were happening as well when it comes to the change of the climate, when it comes to the studios and the unions and all the friction that was going on with that down the line. And then I mentioned influencers are now the A celebrities of the digital mainstream. Because you look at TikTok and how popular it got in 2020. Because when everybody was sitting home with the pandemic, that's one of the platforms that got the most adoption of anything in media. Because where else could they go when they couldn't go to the movies? They couldn't go to Broadway. They were stuck at home. Then you started looking at other things to look at of other people and what they're doing when you couldn't go out and see people yourself. And it's been going on because I feel like celebrities have fallen apart and they're not the same. And then I'll talk about the 10-year music cycle, and where music repeats at 10-year periods and decades are often similar. So we talked about that back in January. And then we also talked about how we went to last year and how corporate media was scrambling for streaming media, trying to get all their platforms launched, ready to go, and trying to bring in as many subscribers as possible. Whatever they had to do, team up with, phone companies like T-Mobile and Verizon to bring in subscriptions, maybe lock them into some 6-month to a year deal, a trial subscription, only to put you in locked into a monthly subscription after that, just to trap you in. And then I mentioned new music doesn't matter in corporate radio, and personalities no longer matter to listeners. And I got into my whole radio deal for a while in February. I was just really pissed off. And my constant gripe that corporate media just likes to crush creativity in favor of content. Couldn't help that. It's something that we saw because we looked at movies and music, and we saw that, Martin Scorsese was talking about cinema was being devalued in content. And Martin Scorsese was taking on the movie industry and streaming. We know Christopher Nolan was also very critical about streaming this year. And then I kept going. Influences become more important than celebrities. And I just felt like it was. You just look, show business just was dead. And without anything else to do, what are you going to do? And we started looking where consumers started to trust influencers over celebrities. And we know that brand influencers are being looked at better than celebrities. And, I did talk to an attorney that works with influencers and celebrities specifically in their marketing efforts. And it was in the cannabis industry. And, it's funny. She was fascinating to talk about this, where she explained how, there's things that influencers are able to do, but celebrities are still professionals. They're still, you need them on time. You need them to go and do what they need to do. They'll perform their duties. Sure, they can do all that. And they can perform it very well. So there's that thought process that celebrities are still I mean, they're trained to do what they need to do to help market or promote or be spokespeople and be ambassadors or endorse whatever there is. They're made for that. But then you look at social media and you look at, the possibilities of working with an influencer and charging a lot less or giving them a lot less than you would a celebrity, and hopefully getting the same kind of impact that you would a celebrity. That's the kind of thought. So it's really just neither or, depending on what you want to do. Plus, you have to consider the celebrity and how peak their status is. And if they're past their prime, if they're still usable, if they still have enough longevity and legacy to be important. Those kind of things you got to think about as well. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'll get back into the month of March, and I'll continue to talk about what happened in the industry itself. There's a lot to go and get into there. You can talk about celebrity culture in decline, and I just stayed on that. Man, I was just on that for a while. I couldn't help myself. And then there was the problem, and then we'll get also into March, the issues where the Grammys, the Golden Globes, and the Oscars all suffered in ratings because of the way they had to be presented, the celebrities, and just a whole feeling of a lot of different reasons that it just hurt altogether. So there's a whole lot more to bring up, but I will bring that up on the next episode. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for listening in. Please make sure to subscribe to the show, rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. I'd really appreciate that. And come back next week for another Broadcasters Podcast. Remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.